Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission, well, it's simple, to give you a distilled understanding of important topics by really diving deep into the sources.
Think of it as your shortcut to being well-informed. We cut through the noise, delivering the core knowledge.
And for you, our listener, if you're curious about how we actually know what we know about the past, well, today we're tackling something pretty fundamental.
We're aiming to unpack the principles historians use, how they investigate, how they interpret the events that came before us.
Exactly. Today we're exploring historiography, essentially, the methods and principles behind historical research. We'll look at how historians figure out what likely happened, what kinds of evidence they use.
All the diverse forms.
Yeah, and the critical frameworks they apply to make sense of it all. Our sources for this, they really dig into how history works as an academic discipline.
And our goal for this deep dive is to get a handle on those fundamental approaches. The core methods that professional historians use, across different schools of thought.
Right. Whether they lean realist, idealist, postmodernist, skeptical, these are the shared tools, basically.
We want to see how they grapple with the complexities of looking back.
Ever just stop and wonder how we can be reasonably confident about things from, say, centuries ago? It's a fascinating question.
It really is. So let's unpack that process.
Okay, so where do we start? What's the bedrock question here?
Well, it's how do historians actually establish what happened? What are the main ways they gather and interpret the traces left behind?
Okay. Our sources lay out a few key categories of evidence. First up, eyewitness testimony.
Right. And in our time, that often means things like recorded lectures, interviews, even video footage, first-hand accounts close to the event.
But going further back,
Then you get into tradition, both written and, importantly, oral tradition, stories passed down.
oral tradition.
Right.
That sounds like it could reach way back.
It potentially can, yeah. But, and this is but our sources emphasize you have to be critical. Think about the story of George Washington and the cherry tree.
Ah, right. Probably not literal history.
Exactly. Or, exaggerated tales about figures like Davy Crockett. Traditions can morph, get embellished, lose their factual core. So caution is needed.
Makes sense. Okay, what else?
Then you have printed or written documents. This is a massive category. Ancient papyri, medieval vellum manuscripts.
All the way to more recent paper records. Letters, official documents, diaries.
Precisely. These give us direct access, often, to past thoughts, actions, societies.
And the last major category.
Archaeological sources. Excavations revealing structures, tools, weapons, coins, artifacts.
How does archaeology fit in? Is it primary evidence?
It's often seen as auxiliary, but incredibly valuable. It gives insights into customs, culture, sometimes specific events. Think about what we've learned from Jewish burial chambers or
The Shroud of Turin, does that count?
well, the potential insights into Roman crucifixion practices, perhaps, or the Dead Sea Scrolls giving us information about the Essenes. Excavations in Greek cities, too, Athens, Corinth, they tell us so much about daily life, art, religion.
Okay, so we have eyewitness accounts, traditions, documents, artifacts. But just gathering this stuff isn't enough, is it?
Not at all. Our sources are really clear on this. Rigorous critical analysis is absolutely crucial, especially when different bits of evidence seem to conflict.
Which must happen a lot.
Oh, constantly. Historians have to be meticulous analysts. They weigh the evidence, evaluate it, and try to arrive at the most plausible explanation.
Is there a term for that?
It's often called inference to the best explanation. Basically, choosing the conclusion that best accounts for all the available data, most comprehensively, most coherently.
Right. And part of that analysis involves understanding where the information comes from, doesn't it? The difference between primary and secondary sources.
Absolutely fundamental. Primary sources are, as the materials put it, underived, firsthand, or contemporary with the event, the most direct link we have.
Like Pliny the Younger's letters, giving that Roman perspective.
Exactly. Or Caesar's own accounts of the Gallic Wars, even, say, Ernie Pyle's wartime dispatches. Those are literary examples.
And non-literary.
Recorded interviews we mentioned, oral traditions if they originate close to the event, photographs, and definitely those archaeological artifacts. They're primary.
And the further back you go,
The rarer these primary sources become. That's
Yeah.
a key challenge in ancient history, obviously.
Okay, so what about secondary sources then?
Secondary sources are interpretations, analyses of the primary materials. Think textbooks, scholarly monographs, edited collections, even university course syllabi.
So they're useful for understanding the primary stuff.
Invaluable, yes.
Excellent.
For context, for seeing different scholarly angles, But secondary sources can also conflict with each other, which reinforces why historians always try to get back to the primary evidence whenever they possibly can.
Okay, so gather the sources, distinguish primary from secondary. What's the next step in the process?
Well, once you have the materials, you need to organize them systematically and apply rigorous criticism. This is where you move from just having the stuff to actually understanding its significance.
And this involves different kinds of criticism.
That's right. For written documents especially, historians use both external and internal criticism.
Let's start with external. What does that involve?
External criticism focuses on the artifact itself, the physical document. And it's often broken down into higher and lower criticism.
Higher criticism.
Higher criticism deals with the document's authenticity. It asks those fundamental questions. Who really wrote this? When? Where? What was the historical context?
Yep.
Who was the intended audience? What might the author's motives have been? And crucially, how reliable are the claims being made? Do they align with other independent sources?
That sounds like detective work.
It really is.
Yeah.
Our sources use the example of Paul's letters in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Even very critical scholars tend to acknowledge their importance as extremely early sources.
Because they're close to the events.
Very close. And in some cases, likely reflecting Paul's own eyewitness experiences or his understanding based on direct contact with other eyewitnesses like Peter, John, James.
He's his brother.
Right. Paul's background as a trained scholar, his interactions, they make him a vital primary source for early Christianity. The source even mentions the philosopher Michael Martin, an atheist, acknowledging the historical weight of Paul's testimony about early beliefs, like the resurrection appearances.
Okay, so that's higher criticism, authenticity, context, reliability. What about lower criticism?
Lower criticism asks a different question. How close is the text we have to the original wording? Since we rarely have the actual original document, especially for ancient texts.
The autograph. Right.
Exactly. Lower criticism involves meticulously examining all the available manuscript copies, figuring out their dates, their relationships to each other, and comparing them to reconstruct the most likely original text. It's about textual transmission.
Got it. So external criticism is about the document itself. What's internal criticism?
Internal criticism shifts the focus to the author and the content within the document. Here, you're evaluating the author's accuracy, their character, their competence.
Like, were they actually in a position to know what they're talking about?
Precisely. Did they have accurate knowledge? And were they likely to be objective? Or might their biases, their beliefs, their affiliations have skewed their account? You're reading between the lines, in a sense.
And does this kind of criticism apply to non-written sources too, like oral traditions?
Yes, though the methods adapt. For oral traditions, or even sermons or hymns passed down, historians try to figure out the original date, the stages of transmission.
How it might have changed.
Exactly. Where did the material come from? What's the potential for distortion? Eyewitness interviews, even though they seem direct, face similar scrutiny. You consider the interviewer's potential influence, the interviewee's memory, their motives, how later events might have reshaped their telling.
And for archaeology, artifacts.
There, critical analysis involves scientific dating methods, radiocarbon dating, for instance, chemical analysis of materials, and crucially, comparing the physical findings with any relevant written accounts to build a fuller picture.
Okay, this is quite a process. We've got the tools, the evidence types, and the critical analysis, external and internal. Now, how do historians apply all this? Our sources mentioned historical rules or critical criteria.
Right. This moves us into how historians assess the probability of specific historical claims, particularly sayings or events attributed to someone.
So these are like tests for authenticity.
Kind of, but it's crucial to understand, as the source stresses, they're epistemic indicators. They give us reasons for thinking something is more or less probable. It's not like if something doesn't meet a specific criterion, it's automatically thrown out as unhistorical.
Okay, it's about weighing probability.
Exactly. They're a framework for evaluating the strength of the evidence we have.
So what are some of these key criteria?
Well, the first one is a strong preference for early sources. Generally, the closer a source is in time to the events it describes, the more weight it carries.
Why is it so important?
Because the potential for memory distortion, transmission errors, or later agendas creeping in generally increases over time. Even a gap of just a decade or two can be really significant, especially in antiquity. Early doesn't automatically mean true, but it's a very strong indicator.
Any examples?
Our source points to the study of the historical Jesus, where material from AD 3050 is considered particularly valuable. like the pre-Pauline Creed in 1 Corinthians 15.
About Jesus' death and resurrection appearances.
Yes, scholars widely date that formula to the early or mid-30s AD, just years after the events. Other examples include early sermon summaries in Acts, possibly dating to the 30s and 40s, ancient creedal bits embedded in New Testament letters, maybe the Q source or the pre-Mark and Passion narrative from the 50s or 60s, and Paul's own earliest letters from the 50s. Early is key.
Makes sense. What's the next criterion?
Eyewitness testimony. Sources that come directly from participants or observers, or sources that clearly rely on such accounts, are considered very strong evidence.
The rule of immediacy, as one historian called it.
That's David Hackett Fisher's term, yes. Prioritizing the best relevant evidence. And of course, if you have an early source that is also based on eyewitness testimony, that's a powerful combination.
Right. Okay, third.
The criterion of multiple attestation. Basically, if a report, a saying, an event shows up in more than one independent source, its likelihood of being factual goes way up.
Independent being the key word there.
Absolutely. If two sources just copied from a third, that doesn't count. But if you have two or more genuinely separate lines of tradition confirming something, that's significant. Paul Mayer is quoted saying, "Many facts from antiquity rest on just one source, so two or three in agreement make a fact pretty solid."
Any examples here?
Well, the source mentions that even the Jesus Seminar, which was often quite skeptical, valued multiple attestations highly. In the Gospels, things like Jesus' miracles or his use of the title Son of Man appear across multiple independent source streams. Mark, Q, Matthew's special material, Luke's special material, John. The empty tomb story also appears in at least 3, maybe 4, independent traditions.
Okay, multiple independent sources. What's next? This one sounds complex. Dissimilarity.
Ah, yes, the criterion of dissimilarity, sometimes called discontinuity or even double dissimilarity. This one's often seen as particularly rigorous.
How does it work?
The idea is that a saying or action is likely authentic if you can't plausibly explain it as coming from the common thinking of the time, in Jesus' case, first century Judaism, or as something created later by his followers to fit their beliefs or needs.
So it has to be distinct from both the context before and the community after.
Essentially, yes, it has to stand out. Michael Grant called it a principal valid method of research.
And the example uses the Son of Man sayings again.
Right. While the concept existed in some Jewish thought, Jesus' specific application of it to himself seems distinctive. And perhaps more tellingly, although it's this most common self-designation in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the early church in the epistles hardly ever refers to him that way.
Suggesting they didn't invent it and put it back into his mouth.
That's the argument. It makes it less likely that the church retrojected it onto Jesus, strengthening the case that it originated with him. Now, this criterion isn't without critics.
How so?
Some argue that if you only accept things that are dissimilar, you risk creating a sterile Jesus, someone completely disconnected from his Jewish roots and the church that followed him. You might miss how he built on existing ideas or how his followers accurately remember things that did align with later beliefs.
So it might filter out too much.
Potentially. But the counterargument is that while it might be restrictive, it gives us a higher degree of confidence in the authenticity of the specific, unique elements it identifies. It isolates what's distinctively him.
Okay, a powerful but potentially tricky tool. What's the fifth criterion?
This one's about language and location. Aramaic language or Palestinian origin, since Jesus and his first followers spoke Aramaic and lived in first century Palestine.
Finding traces of that in the Greek Gospels would be significant.
Exactly. The presence of actual Aramaic words or Semitic linguistic structures showing through the Greek, or accurate details about Palestinian geography or customs, these suggest authenticity, a connection to the original setting.
Like specific Aramaic phrases attributed to Jesus?
Yes, the source mentions, Talitha kum, little girl, get up, maybe Epha be opened in healing, and importantly, his use of Abba to address God.
Abba.
Joachim Jeremias did extensive work on this, arguing it was an unusually intimate familial term for God in that context, suggesting something unique about Jesus' usage.
Interesting. Okay, number 6.
The criterion of embarrassment, sometimes called negative report or surprise.
Embarrassment? How does that work?
The logic is, if an account includes details that would likely have been awkward, counterproductive, or, well, embarrassing for the author, their subject, or the group they belong to, it's more likely to be true. Why invent something potentially damaging?
Unless there's a good reason like it actually happened.
Precisely. Examples often cited from the Gospels include the initial disbelief of Jesus' own family, including James. Or Jesus saying he doesn't know the time of his return in Mark 13. Donald Guthrie pointed that out.
That might seem to diminish his authority slightly.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that women were the first witnesses to the empty tomb in a society where female testimony wasn't always highly valued, that detail might have been considered less persuasive, making it less likely to be invented.
And even the disciples messing up.
Right, their repeated misunderstandings, their doubts, Peter's denial. These portrayals aren't always flattering to the future leaders of the church, suggesting they reflect real memories rather than later idealization.
Okay, that makes sense. Seventh criterion.
Enemy attestation. This is when sources hostile to a person or movement inadvertently confirm certain facts.
Like the Cicero-Catiline example. If your enemy admits something positive about you.
It carries extra weight, exactly. Regarding Jesus, the Gospels mention opponents witnessing his miracles, but attributing them to satanic power. They don't deny the phenomena, you see.
They just offer a different explanation, but implicitly confirm something happened.
Right. Marcus Borg made that point. Another example is the story of the Jewish authorities bribing the tomb guards to say the disciples stole the body. That story implicitly concedes that the tomb was empty.
Acknowledging the core fact even while trying to spin it. Got it. Is there one more?
The last one discussed is the criterion of coherence. This suggests that if a saying or event fits well with other things already established as historical about that person or period, it gains credibility.
So does it align with the known pattern?
Yes. John Meyer uses the example of Jesus' teaching about resurrection in Mark 12, cohering with a similar saying in Q, or Jesus' family rejecting him cohering with his teaching that following him might cause family division. It makes sense within the broader picture.
But this one sounds a bit weaker.
It is generally considered the weakest criterion when used alone. Just because something could fit doesn't mean it's independently attested or definitely authentic. It's supportive, but not conclusive on its own. Dale Allison suggests maybe calling things supported only by coherence, possibly authentic.
Okay, so we have early sources, eyewitnesses, multiple sources, dissimilarity, Aramaic Palestinian traces, embarrassment, enemy attestation, and coherence. That's quite a toolkit.
It is. And historians use these, often in combination, to weigh the evidence.
So putting it all together then, the historian's process involves what? Collecting materials?
Diligently collecting diverse materials, yes. Then systematically organizing them. Then applying that rigorous external and internal criticism we talked about.
Assessing reliability, authenticity.
And then formulating reasoned conclusions, using these criteria to judge the probability of different claims based on the weight of the evidence.
And then they share their findings.
Right, through peer-reviewed articles, books, conference papers. Where the findings get subjected to scrutiny by other experts in the field, peer review is crucial.
So it's really about building the most likely picture, not claiming absolute certainty.
Exactly. The historical tools help sift through what's left from the past to present the most probable scenarios. It's about achieving a reasonable degree of confidence.
And, as Cairns is quoted, historians often do reach a surprising consensus on basic facts and many conclusions, despite the challenges.
Yes, through the consistent application of these methods, a coherent picture often emerges.
Which brings us back to that initial question, how can we be confident about the past?
It's through this whole rigorous process. Scrutinizing sources, applying critical analysis using these criteria, that's how historians strive to reconstruct the past with the highest probability possible.
So, to wrap up our deep dive today, we've explored the historian's toolkit, the essential methods and rules of historiography. It's clearly a meticulous, multifaceted process.
Absolutely. And for you, our listener, hopefully this gives you a better appreciation for the depth of analysis behind historical knowledge. You can approach claims about the past with a more discerning eye now, understanding the complexities involved.
Definitely. And here's something to ponder. Thinking about all those criteria, early sources, embarrassment, multiple attestation, and the rest, which type of historical evidence do you personally find most compelling?
And why might that be? What does that say about how you think about proof in the past? It's worth reflecting on.
A good thought to leave with. Our goal here at the Deep Dive is always to provide that shortcut to being well-informed and hopefully to spark a deeper appreciation for how we come to know things.